Hi everyone! Today, me and Endless Midnight Moon are going to be talking about her Tapas novel, Beyond the Gray Skies, which is an alternative history, and we will be asking some basic questions, four of them, which have been covered on Instagram Live, about why she chose to write this novel. So without further ado.
Thank you, Fortuna Skins, for having me on. I think to start with, we should talk about the summary first about this story.
Yes.
Okay. The era of revolutions came and stayed in the continent, with changes upon every country, regardless of whether they rose to establish a new regime or kept their traditional rule. It obliterated the old order, asking all the young to lead by their dreams instead of being bound by tradition and order. Annibale has gotten everything he wanted out of life so far, but he seeks more to find his next horizon, leading him to find out more about his family. Amaranta returned to Rovanas, seeking to start a line of fashion and have her own collection, but still wanting to have something to fall back upon should things go wrong, so she takes a job.
Mm-hmm. It's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Guys, please subscribe to her on Tapas. It's a wonderful novel and it's very extensive. She has done excellent world building and she even has a website of her own, which is endlessperiodicals.com, where she has more details about this wonderful universe.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Yes.
So some of the questions we're going to ask in this episode is, why did you choose to write this story?
I think for me, it's back to the basic question is it was an old story that I thought about. I think maybe the work was already there from the beginning, but it's just like I took the time to but then I started fleshing out somewhere between late 2019. Actually, yeah, because 2019 was a strange year for me. Actually, the real idea came is in December 2019 after I had a slight funny accident. It kind of took me off writing for at least a week or two because I injured my wrist, and then I thought about actually that I and then that's when Beyond the Grey Skies ideas started to come to my mind. I was working on like a revised draft of this very old story, but eventually I turned it into something new because think that actually I could look at it that way, and I think I like it very much.
Mm-hmm. I see.
I still have the very old draft sitting around in my Google Docs.
Ah, I see. How much do you think it has changed since your old drafts?
Old drafts. A lot. I think when I was writing just the first volume, by halfway through the first volume, I just completely changed my plans. The idea was something very different, but then eventually I just like think, oh, maybe I could explore this. I could try this instead of that, and that's how the idea really got developed into like a whole world.
I see. So the original idea wasn't as extensive, right?
No, I think the original idea back then I wasn't so into like doing so much historical research about the Napoleonic period in total, and I just didn't realize how fascinating it was. Now, after going through at least two rounds of the French Revolution, I think I kind of get it. Why I'm even more fascinated by it than before.
I see. So research really did help you flesh out a lot of things and change your story, from what it used to be.
Yeah, especially the political side, because initially I don't think I really understood like a lot of the nuances of like the revolutionary period in total. Now I think like yeah, I think I pretty much get it.
Yes, in your story, revolutions really do have a large impact on the character's self-discovery and a lot of the plot.
Yes, yeah, I admit true. Although if there's no revolution, the life of everybody here would be very different. Well, let's just say that Ani Bali would have his grandfather.
So so that's is there any other reason that you chose to write this story?
Any other reason? I think eventually when I started thinking about it, I thought about writing about capitalism because again, I'm a capitalist at the end of the day. I like the theory of it and I like how it works.
So in many ways, you're like Annibale because he also calls himself a proud capitalist.
Yep. Yeah, we all see each other in our own characters. As for Amaranta, I think the difficult part about her is like okay, maybe somewhere down the line I was a bit wishful because like I'm terrible at my hands, whereas Amaranta is very good at her hands.
Yes, she is someone who is really good at making things and is very detail oriented, I think.
which is something I'm not completely. Yeah, but then again, by this point in time, I have like so many notes just to keep myself straight.
Yeah, I think you are detail oriented because, you did so much research for this series and, it's very extensive and it's just amazing about how much world building you have been doing, especially what I've seen also on your website. You've been laying out brick by brick all the different families, all the different characters, and, even the different countries, which, I think are really interesting because they have real world parallels that I can already sense, but then at the same time you've also taken some liberties to create alternate versions of them.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, for me, it's like the okay. I think if I were to say why they had to create alternate versions was like for the 19th century, Britain was the dominant power. It was the dominant power for most of it. In this case, I'm just taking what if I say I take a step back from me and you kind of like a not really a shelf Britain to the side. It's still quite important, but it's like but France is now like kind of dominant because because France was dominant for a decade, then it just lost its most of its prestige. It almost became nothing. Almost.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And your characters, they are living in an alternate version of Italy, right?
Yeah, yeah, ultimate version of Italy.
So in your alternate version of Italy, how does it differ from, the real world history version of it?
Actually, it's probably called an early reunification of Italy. Early unification of Italy. Like it's kind of early, but sometimes there's also quite a fair bit of it that's quite changed. I guess it's not quite like the old Italy, the way old Italy was, but it's not quite like the one that came before. So like I just took some liberties, some ideas, and although I haven't really completely fleshed out the things I've done for that, but like how it got to that stage just yet.
Mm-hmm. What region of Italy is, the country that Annibale and Amaranta are from?
Probably the northern side. I think it's probably more of actually probably more of maybe closer to Piedmont and possibly Parma.
Ah, I see. And how does that influence, the culture they're in and anything else that, that they experience? How do you think that regional choice of that region, how does that influence, the story
I
and the
think that the
characters?
regional. Okay, thank you so much for the question. The regional choice is because well, northern Italy was the place where a lot of the battleground lines were drawn and they were fought very early on. Like yeah, so like that was where it really got the fighting really got on, and that was one Napoleon's first conquest.
Mm-hmm. Ah,
Yeah.
I see. So it is connected to once again Napoleon and the influence of the Napoleonic Wars and the Napoleon era on the whole of Europe.
Yeah, yeah, initially that was the idea, and then eventually it kind of made sense to put it to north because because Napoleonic Italy was focused on the northern side for most part until before he went to the south and he just gave the kingdom of Naples away to his brother.
I see. What would you say is the most difficult part of the story to write?
I think it's like how it's not really the plotting. The plotting is that it's just that I lay out the threads and I try to bring it together. I hate to say this by this point. George R. R. Martin's a big influence on how I write because I'm like a gardener too. I garden my
Mm,
stuff.
mm-hmm.
That eventually it's just like I just have to try slowly bring it together and to like understand okay how does this work, how does this happen, how can I bring this all into one thread. That's actually not the hard part is like it's how do I feel as though this is alternate history but sometimes it's not because it has a very strong influence of normal history, but then again I'm really taking liberties with a lot of history, so that's also that part where it makes you think that yeah I'm just pretty okay with this being alternate history and like giving it my own names and all that because it's difficult to mess with other people's history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So yeah, that makes sense. I think in general, alternate history is kind of balancing fictional elements with, what is actually happening in history. So that would be, I guess, one of the most difficult parts of writing it and constructing the world.
yeah, it's like it's trying to figure out what could be, what would be, and what might have been.
Mm-hmm. How would you say writing the characters was like?
Let's just say, I think writing Amaranta was very hard. You figured it's more like in volume two, you'll find out why it's very hard. But then Annibale was pretty fun. He was a very fun character to write.
How about the other characters? Because you do have a lot of characters in general,
Yeah, I
in
do.
yeah, on your website. Like, do you
I
think any of
think
them are
yeah.
harder to write in general or easier to write?
I actually I is in terms of POV, I think like yeah, okay, in terms of the characters in general, a very hard character let's just think. Yeah, I think there are some harder characters which something like if I'm talking about spy masters in general, oh, those are hard. Those are very hard to write because I need to think about how what would he say to her, what would they give, what would she actually give out, and then like the information and all that stuff, and their personality too. I would say take that into account. I would say that although I've never written Annibal's parents, but yeah, but if I write them, it's gonna be hard. I only
Mm-hmm.
given like breadcrumbs to the what kind of characters they were, what kind of people they were, like their characters, their temperaments and all that. But I haven't really gone in depth into it.
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes some characters, it's easier for them to be kind of, breadcrumbs, as you said, especially since they may not have to make such an appearance so far, right? Especially if they are part of the past or if they don't have to make an appearance so soon. So it is easier to kind of just lead up to them appearing or finding out more information about them.
Yeah, although technically, I wouldn't say Annibal's grandmother is very hard to write because I spent a lot of time in her head. Even way before I started writing it, I kind of already got the idea about how she's gonna be like, and like the kind of character writing she's gonna have. And although it's like she's a very majorly dark character, but she's not that hard.
Mm-hmm. I think she is not that hard either. From what I've seen of her so far, I think she's very interesting. And you've done a really great job, kind of building, the events around her. And it makes you want to learn more about this character.
Well, honestly, yeah, definitely. And I think for me, I think Lorenzo was kind of difficult initially, but once I figured out that once I figured out he was a dreamer, it was very easy to place him into a very particular role. Like he was a dreamer. He was not a very grounded person.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the third question we have here is, what do you seek to explore through alternate history?
I think for me, the biggest part about alternate history is how the world can go mad in just if you just put the right things into it. I think
Mm-hmm,
because like the idea, I think for me a lot of my influences that shaped the idea came throughout 2020. It was like the year of the lockdown. A lot of my very solid ideas came around that period of lockdown from like maybe around starting from February to around April, May maybe, because that was when it was really high in Singapore and like I was watching it every day and I was like, okay, maybe it feels like the world is going mad. Well, and then I realized that history all times it was really going mad most of the time. And this is why I actually want to take out Europe because I take out Britain. Britain was very simple. It was a very simplistic country. It was like in the first two decades, it was just we hate Napoleon, we want to get him out.
mm-hmm,
And yeah, they did that for like, I mean, like they fought like 6 coalition wars. I'm like, seriously, they really, really, really hated the guy.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was like yeah. So it's also because of that he was making France a real threat to them. So there was also that issue too. But because Britain was so calm compared to the most rest of Europe and like and eventually later on the Middle East because it just went to like complete chaos in the 18 for most of the early 19th century. It just was wow, this is revolution after revolution after revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because even after the Napoleonic period, there was one revolution in Greece.
Wow, I see. Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. Actually, for me as well, during 2020, during the lockdown, and, just seeing all this thing happen around the whole world with COVID-19, I actually got prompted to write more as well. 2020 was also a really major year for me creatively because it was when I started, for real, doing stuff for Sam in New York. Before, I had ideas about Sam in New York, but I never really put them, into a comic or a story or anything that could be consumed by the public at large. What I had was just basically a collection of pictures with really long descriptions, as some of my followers remember. So last year was when I finally made stories about them that most people can get into, not just, oh, yeah, there's a picture and there's a long ass description. So 2020, I think for many people, not just you and me, was when we got a lot of our projects actually started. So there is a silver lining to the whole COVID crisis.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it's just like and also I think a lot of the things I did was about experiencing adulthood as I went along. Because like when I wrote this, I was maybe still a little greener, but by now it's like I kind of like have a strange experience with finding jobs. I don't know. I would say I'm lucky, I guess. I
Definitely
would.
lucky because, it has been hard for many people in different countries to find jobs since COVID.
Yeah, and so like it was like a lot of the feelings of adulthood and a lot of that came into like beyond the gray skies, and it's like concept of dreams. I guess dreams is actually a very big part of it, and I definitely would want to like explore it more in volume 3 and volume 4. Oh yeah, it's just like the first two, and also I think the second part is legacies too. It's like there's a complex legacy left by his family, and just dealing with it is just complicated.
I think the legacy part of the story, from what I've seen so far, really has the potential to kind of see more of the world as well, because a lot of his family members were involved in a lot of the world building that you've been doing, such as the revolutions and also connections to other countries as well.
Yeah, actually, yeah, he has quite a lot of connections to other countries, though. Actually, so far it's like there's just his. Actually, it's mostly just between Itoro and Rancy. The two of them are the ones that he has main connections to. But there'll be one more later on. If you read latest chapters, you probably know.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit already, and it's very exciting. I can't wait to dig in more.
Yeah, and it's not like I say that after Beyond the Grey Skies, the next thing we'll be talking about how to set up a revolution.
Right. And then our fourth question here is, how do you research for alternate history?
I think because they is to study the character of the people that you're basing it off, and study the situation of the countries that you're using. Because then if you know the situation of the country, it's very easy. Like even though at this point Britain was a superpower, I actually decided to say that it got its wings clipped a little bit. I mean, in fact, it's not the superpower, but it's still no joke either. It hasn't been beaten into submission by the French, by the Rancians at all. It's just been like, well, we just do our own thing, I guess. Yeah, so it's just like a learn saying how to understand your situation and learning how to deal with them as it goes along, and like what can you do with it and what can you not do with it, and then just trying to understand the culture. Yeah, I would say culture is not as important in my story at this point, but like it's kind of been very interesting as like a main source. One of the sources I'm using was Will and Ariel's Durant's books. Like, okay, they're like it's a very old book that covers most of the work history. It's very grand. It's a great overview story, but although I use a lot of other resources to delve deeper, I think a very big influence of my story was, do you know about Mike Duncan?
No, I don't.
Oh, he was I actually listened to his podcast about the history of Rome. I was like
Oh,
thinking,
I see.
I was bored. I was thinking, the history was not interesting. I just listened to it. After that, I kind of got hooked onto his material. And then
Mm,
eventually he started a podcast called Revolutions.
I see. So you've been relying a lot on rare books as well, right? And how do you get them? Is it mostly like a digital version of the rare books, or do you actually get your hands on the physical copy?
I'm definitely relying more on ebooks, I guess. Yeah, because like I don't have a lot of resources right now, so I'm relying a lot on ebooks. But I am planning to get a lot of the rarer books as I delve into building up the more harder parts of the world, yeah, basically all the revolutions that was not related to France or England, because those things tend to be more. They're not really footnotes. It's just like they never really delve very in depth. Like I think the Daily I think the Greek Wars of Independence was very interesting because like it was just like half the time they were fighting a civil war against each other and against the Ottoman Empire.
That's true. You have an alternative version of the Ottoman Empire as well, as I've seen.
Yep. It's gonna be an interesting place to be. It's like, okay, I was actually very entranced by the Ottoman Empire. Yeah, it's a very very grand idea, and like it expanded its borders very, very fast and very far. But although by then by this point in time, they are really struggling to keep a hold of everything. And in fact, yeah, actually, yeah. So that's that. Like how they lost Egypt was a really funny story. Actually, it really was. It was just Napoleon's way of saying, "Oh, I want to get back Britain. How to get back him? It Attack Britain? No way. Attack Egypt? Yes."
Mm-hmm.
It was still a suicide mission anyway.
Yes. So, what other resources beside podcasts and books have you been using for alternative
Um,
history?
I think actually the third one is actually kind of like forms talking about history. There are quite a lot of forms around here that they really delve. And then one of it was alternatehistory.com. It kind of really like gave my mind to like a lot of alternate ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And like thinking about, oh, what if this person did this? Why this person survived? What is all this stuff what if all this stuff happened? It could be like I remember there's like one thing where just one thing changed and 20 years later it's like I can't recognize this Europe anymore. What is this Europe?
True. I think a lot of alternate history is really fun in that way because you really think about what the borders would have been like and even how, our day would be like, our times would be like if this one little thing had changed 500 or 200 or 100 years ago.
Yeah, and then it's like in alternate history, it's actually rarer to find threads that go back older than the ones that go back that are very recent because it's harder to write about things you know less about than you know about like 100 years ago.
That's true. All the stuff that was 100 years ago was pretty well documented, but the further back you go, it becomes a little bit unreliable, or, there's going to be contradictions, or it's just hard to imagine because it's so different from our current time.
Or it could just be so it can be kind of like what people call neglected. Yeah, because like before this, I kind of have an idea for about song about China in general. It's more like Song Dynasty China.
Hmm.
Yeah, so like it was actually more mercantile than it was an empire.
Hmm.
Yeah, but even then, it's like I don't really know a lot about that period, so I have to like I'm probably gonna have to learn how to read Chinese again. My Chinese
Yeah.
isn't good.
Yeah. You already wrote a novel about China.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. You
It,
finished it too.
it's not really. It kind of was just a stopping point, but I really wanted to finish it.
Oh, I
Although I had
see.
other ideas, but it feels like it was a good stopping point.
Hmm.
It's just I didn't really understand the period back then, and now it's like yeah. When I get back to it, okay, if I ever get back to it, it'd be very different.
Yeah. It's always fun to revisit stuff that you've kind of just put there for now and kind of see how you change it in the future as you learn
Definitely.
more about the research and the characters and such.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's like yeah. I'm pretty sure it happened for you as well in with Sam in New York and all that stuff.
Definitely. I think as writers, we kind of see our own work grow as we grow as people.
I would say it happened a lot because I'm a very young because I'm a very young person.
That's true. You are. Yeah, you are very young. So, you're going to be experiencing a lot of things in the next few years that may also influence your work.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely will.
It's going to be a very exciting journey.
Most definitely. Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah, so like I think yeah, so the difficult so alternate history is just like I think for me it's because I'm interested in knowing why rather than what happened. Because if you're focusing on what happened, right, you're really constricting yourself to just a few things. In fact, you cannot really take a lot of liberties because you're very limited in what you do know unless you're writing about nobodies.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, so like that's the problem is like when you're trying to like go very small, very detailed, if some people it's actually a blessing because like they need that kind of structure, but for me it's like yeah, I think I'm thinking about what could have been because I'm actually because again I'm very interested with Napoleon because again Napoleon has charmed a lot of people when it comes to writing down stuff. He's the guy who probably has more stuff published than days he are dead than the days he is dead.
That's true. So, in a future episode, we're going to be talking more about your specific influences, right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
actually, and also the scope. If I talk about the scope right now, I generally it's like Beyond the Gray I'll just close it at volume 4 because I think that's where the story really comes to a more tangible end. But then if I ever write another potential, it's not maybe sequel, maybe spin-off, it might be something else. It'll probably be set in the same universe, but it might use the same characters, it might not use the same characters. Just that I have some ideas about what it looks like right now.
Yeah, it's going to be very fun. And that's another thing about writing about a different world. There's so much flexibility because when you're writing about a different world, you can still write about that world, but with a different set of characters. And that will elucidate a different aspect of that world as well.
Or even like for me it's like it's actually very about a different city, a different political situation, like okay because right now I'm actually focusing a lot on Eastern Europe because Eastern Europe is a very I feel as though it really drew the short end of the stick. There are a lot of reasons why people fled from Eastern Europe because it really, really drew the short end of the stick.
Yes, and it's usually not, part of, when people think about European history, sadly, Eastern and I think parts of Central and Northern Europe were kind of ignored and kind of put to the side.
Yeah, I think for me, what I think is typically ignored is definitely Italy is half half. The Roman period definitely they had a lot of focus. The Renaissance, yes, but after that, no one really cares.
That's true. You're very right. And you are, kind of going against that.
Yeah, it's just like I think because like I like to because like as a writer, like you're going to have to look for chaos instead of looking for order, because it's more fun to write about chaos than it is to write about order.
That's true. I wonder what that says about your alignments.
A lot of stuff, a lot of
Yeah, a
stuff.
lot of stuff.
Yeah, actually, secondly, even Southern Europe like Spain, at most they cover its golden age, the Habsburgs of Spain. After it went bankrupt, nobody really cared much about it. Portugal just had a very short period of time on world history, then just also faded too. Like this is just the real Western Europe. I really got to like places like Greece that somehow got a German king onto it. Yep, they were Greeks. They were Greeks. They were Orthodox. They ended up having a Catholic German king. Irony.
I know. Right. So, next episode you're going to be on, we can talk about your inspirations and what else would you like to talk about for the next episode?
I think if I talk about I think for me it's like inspiration is definitely one the it could be very big, and yeah, I think it's just in general just scope because like by this point I'm just going to be talking about Europe in general because I do have some concrete ideas about a potential idea about Eastern Europe, mostly Poland,
Mm,
because Poland,
same.
oh poor Poland.
Yes, it's going to be very interesting. And we're also going to be talking about, I think, why you chose Southern Europe as your focus in more detail for the next episode.
Actually, yeah, I think Genovese Beyond the Grey Skies and then whatever's going to come after it, immediately after it, will actually be focused on Southern Europe, or rather Mediterranean.
Right. So, guys, prepare for this and subscribe to her on Tapas, Beyond the Gray Skies. It's going to be great.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much for having
Thank
me
you so
on.
much. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.